Federal authorities have opened a criminal investigation into one of NASCAR's most established teams. The allegation is not a technical oversight or a borderline rulebook violation. It is systematic, intentional cheating, conducted across multiple vehicles over an extended period, with apparent involvement at the senior leadership level. Race wins may be erased. Championship records may be rewritten. The sport's claim to fair competition is now formally in question. NASCAR's competitive structure depends on engineering precision in a way that distinguishes it from most professional sports. Every car is built to specification. Every component is measured, logged, and cleared before it reaches a racetrack. The sport has operated under this model for over 75 years, and its credibility rests on a single premise: that teams compete within a shared rulebook, and that results reflect legal effort, not technical circumvention. The margins inside that system are extremely narrow. The gap between championship contention and midfield can be decided by thousandths of a second, by components that differ from a competitor's by fractions of an inch. Championship points, sponsorship value, and driver contracts are all determined within those margins. For hot team name, the stakes at the top of the series appear to have become sufficient motivation to break the rules. The investigation was initiated not by NASCAR's internal compliance process, but by the FBI and the Department of Justice. The allegation covers systematic violations across multiple vehicles over an extended period. Investigators searched the team's facility and documented several categories of evidence. The team had been running cylinder heads, pistons, and internal engine components that exceeded legal specifications. Parts that cleared inspection because the modifications had been engineered specifically to avoid detection. This was not an isolated incident. Documentation indicates the practice continued for months, across multiple vehicles and multiple race weekends. When NASCAR officials raised questions, the team allegedly submitted falsified documentation certifying parts as compliant that it knew were not. That conduct, if proven, constitutes obstruction and conspiracy. Emails, text messages, and witness statements further indicate that the team principal and senior engineers were aware of the violations, and that they approved and organized them. The scope of what is alleged is not consistent with a lower-level equipment decision. It describes a coordinated institutional choice. Independent analysis by engineers from competing teams estimates the illegal modifications produced between 8 and 15 additional horsepower per race. In NASCAR's competitive environment, that figure is meaningful. 15 horsepower can separate pole position from fifth place. It influences standings positions directly, and standings positions determine sponsorship terms, driver valuations, and championship outcomes. Compounded across 6 months of races, the cumulative effect on the standings is substantial. Competing teams spent millions attempting to develop legal performance gains. Team name bypassed that process entirely. Driver name. Like this team's championship contender, won number races this season. Those victories are subject to review. His accumulated championship points could be stripped. The decision to run illegal equipment, made by team personnel, not the driver, may nonetheless erase what would otherwise be a significant competitive year. He is not the only driver affected. Multiple competitors across the standings may see their records revised once the review process concludes. The consequences extend well beyond the team itself. NASCAR's available sanctions include fines estimated in the $5 to $10 million range or higher, loss of championship points from affected races, suspension of key personnel, confiscation of vehicles and equipment, and potential revocation of charter status, which would end the team's ability to compete as a full-time series entry. While permanent expulsion has been raised as a possibility, though it remains rare in NASCAR's disciplinary history. The drivers who competed in these cars may have had no knowledge of the modifications. Their legal exposure is limited. Their commercial exposure is not. At least one driver lost a sponsorship contract within 24 hours of the story becoming public. Several sponsors have already withdrawn from the team entirely. Others have described their position as under review, which, in practice, means the same thing. The mechanics, fabricators, and support staff who kept this team operational, most of whom had no role in the decisions under investigation, are now without employment in a sport where professional associations follow you. The team's infrastructure has effectively collapsed around them. For NASCAR as an institution, and this is a legitimacy challenge different in kind from prior cheating incidents. It involves federal criminal jurisdiction, documented evidence, and alleged organizational coordination. Every race result from the affected period is now subject to question. The investigation began in month, following a tip to federal authorities. The precise origin has not been confirmed. The evidence gathered includes internal communications referencing illegal components, photographs and video of the modifications, statements from team personnel, financial records showing procurement of non-compliant parts, and technical analysis from independent experts. The legal process will distinguish between levels of culpability. The person who installed an illegal component and the person who directed that installation occupy different positions under law. Within motorsport, the standard runs differently. A team principal carries responsibility for operations conducted under their authority, regardless of direct personal involvement. NASCAR's jurisdiction covers sporting penalties. Federal jurisdiction covers potential criminal prosecution. If the Department of Justice proceeds with charges, the consequences shift to potential prison sentences, fines exceeding anything NASCAR can impose, and a public trial proceeding on its own timeline. Several questions remain open. How far back the conduct extends, whether other teams are engaged in similar practices, and whether criminal charges will be filed. The broader question, and the one with longer-term significance, is why a team with the resources, personnel, and competitive infrastructure of team name chose to cheat. NASCAR's television ratings have declined over a sustained period, while Formula One, IndyCar, and other motorsport properties have grown. That market pressure concentrates at the team level through sponsorship negotiations and broadcast exposure. The financial differential between a championship season and a non-championship season at the top of the series is estimated at $20 to $30 million. A figure that encompasses sponsorship premiums, media placement, and driver market value. For a large organization, the difference has direct implications for operational continuity. Modern manufacturing technology makes illegal modifications harder to conceal than they once were. CNC machining generates logs. Components carry serial numbers. Procurement creates financial records. And there is no practical method of altering a modern race car at this level and leaving no traceable evidence. Team name had the budget and the engineering staff to compete legally. The evidence suggests they concluded that legal competition was insufficient and that the risk of detection was manageable. That calculation reflects a systemic condition, not simply one team's ethical failure. NASCAR and federal authorities are evaluating responses that will set a precedent. 3 primary scenarios are under discussion. Under maximum penalties, NASCAR would impose an indefinite competition ban, strip all wins and points from the affected season, and issue the largest financial penalty in the organization's history. The signal would be unambiguous, but it would also end a historically significant franchise and introduce instability into the series. Under measured penalties, NASCAR would impose substantial but recoverable sanctions, significant point losses, a major fine, and multi-race suspensions for key personnel, while the criminal investigation proceeds separately. The approach is proportional, though affected competitors may view proportionality as inadequate. Under a negotiated settlement, the team would formally admit wrongdoing, pay a substantial fine, accept points penalties and independent oversight, and replace senior management in exchange for being allowed to continue under probation. That outcome provides institutional resolution, but carries the risk of appearing lenient. If the Department of Justice files criminal charges, NASCAR's internal penalties become secondary. The proceeding would involve potential prison sentences and a public trial the sport cannot manage on its own schedule. Several conclusions are supported by what is already established. Regulatory oversight and financial penalties do not eliminate the decision to cheat when incentives are sufficiently high. Technology has made cheating both more sophisticated and more traceable. Detection now requires federal resources, but once those resources are applied, the record is difficult to eliminate. The legitimacy concerns NASCAR faces are not attributable to this team alone. They reflect structural pressure that has been accumulating for years. And the consequences are not distributed evenly. People who had no knowledge of what was decided above them are now directly affected. NASCAR's operational model depends on the audience's belief that competition is conducted fairly. When that belief is challenged credibly, at this scale, the sport's commercial structure faces pressures that results on the track cannot resolve. The investigation will continue. Criminal charges remain pending. For everyone named in this case, the outcomes are unresolved. The sport's central challenge now is to demonstrate, through the decisions it makes in this process, that its standards are enforceable and its results can be trusted.